Welcome back to the Design, Build, Hunt podcast. And on the line with me, I've got Mr. Jake Hendrickson from Whitetail Partners, Michigan. How's it going, Jake?
Going pretty good. How are you, Josh?
Doing well. I'm going to introduce myself because someone pointed out to me the other week, hey, you introduce everybody but yourself. So this week, I'm going to be very careful to introduce myself. I'm Josh Raley, Whitetail Partners, Georgia. Jake, we've got a fun one tonight. These are becoming not only a listener favorite, but I think a favorite for us too, where we can kind of share what we've been doing. We've got another property breakdown here.
Yeah. So yeah, we have we kind of share these behind the scenes. Like we have folders that we can kind of share designs with each other, but we don't normally talk about them. We don't normally spend time like this to go over the why behind what we're doing. And so these are really fun just for us to kind of pick each other's brain. Why did you do this? Or I really like what you did there. And so yeah, I really enjoy these property reviews, and I know the viewers do, or listeners do as well.
Right, absolutely. So if you're just listening to this, let me encourage you, either finish listening to it, on your way to work and then go watch the YouTube video. Or if you're listening at home, pause it right now, go jump on our YouTube channel and go watch it, because you're going to pick up way more by watching the video of this episode than you will from listening to it. It's not to say you won't get anything from listening, but it is to say you're going to get a lot more from watching what you can see on our YouTube channel. I also want to couch this by saying, this is how big of a property?
So this one's going to be 40 acres, and that's I would say a typical size for the clients that I have here in Michigan. And 40, 100, 20. I've had some as low as 10. So I mean, it's that's a fairly standard size for a parcel here in Michigan.
Right. So if you're listening and you've got a 40-acre parcel, or if you're watching and you've got a 40-acre parcel, please don't think that you can take this plan and just copy and paste it onto your 40-acre parcel and expect it to work as well as it does on this specific property. Every property is unique. Every property has its own strengths, its own weaknesses. Every deer neighborhood has its own strengths and weaknesses that we are working with. So there is a lot you can pick up and apply and learn, but I don't want anybody to think like, hey, all I got to do is like screenshot this and it's going to be perfect for my property, because chances are your property and this one are going to differ pretty significantly, even if they look similar from the air. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, obviously to me. And same with this one here. Like I guess I can go right to the computer here and kind of zoom out a little bit so we can see the neighborhood. And what I'm going to do first is just apply the property line so we can kind of see the property that we're working with here. This is our client's property here in Michigan, 40 acres. And like Josh said, every property is going to be a little bit different with how it's laid out. And this property right away, just kind of want to show you guys some of the key features that we're dealing with, the things that we cannot control that we are going to work around. And that's where the dwelling is here in the center on the east side of the property. And he has this long driveway coming down to the house. And this particular family has livestock. I think they had like a donkey. I think they had some sheep, a cow, a lot of chickens, and so that those are all fenced in on the north side of the house here. And then they have a 1 acre garden on the south side of the house. So I think in total, this area here is around 8 acres. So when you think about it, this is a 40-acre parcel, but 8 acres are going to be non-deer area. This is not for deer hunting. This is for family use, and so that is something that we have to take into consideration when we are designing the parcel. So like every property is going to be different. If the house was located next to the road, this design would likely look different, but it's not. So this is a property where we have a dwelling kind of towards the middle on the east side in a very large family area. Almost 25% of the property is family use.
Well, I'm excited to see the rest of the plan. I'm curious to see your approach to a property like this with a dwelling right in the middle, to see, are we going to try to pull the deer away from that? Or are we going to try to maximize that and kind of get them on the fringe, and so set us up for some really low impact hunting, maybe just off the yard? So I'll just let you take it away from here. It looks like you're in a relatively wet area. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there are going to be areas that, so off here to the west, I think that's what you're looking at here. That's fairly wet, and that's one of the things I do right away is I'm going to kind of zoom out and look at this property and look at the neighborhood in general to see what it is we're working with here. Is this going to be like a area with a lot of cover, a heavy cover scenario, or are we going to have a lot of food in the area with a lot of agriculture fields? And this is going to tell us, you know, how much food do we need to provide on the property? Like if you have a property with a lot of ag in the area, and you put food plots in, there's definitely going to be a draw for those deer. But it's it's uh, it's not going to you don't have to put as much food in on a property in an ag region that you would, let's say, in a heavy cover area. If you're in a heavy cover area and you put in uh, maybe 2% of the property in food, that 2% is going to get hammered by the local deer herd. But you put 2% of food in a heavy ag area, that might withstand the pressure, the browsing pressure throughout the entire season, depending on the deer density in that area. But so that's something that I look at right away. Kind of what am I dealing with as far as like food and cover, and I also look for these long travel corridors. Like how are the deer moving through the area, and how does my client's parcel fit within that movement? And so I can see right away here that I have a pretty good travel corridor through here as these deer want to move east to west. I've got another one, another corner here that the deer can kind of cut through. And then also, if the deer ever wanted to go north to south, if they want to cross the road here, this is one of the areas that they're going to do it. This is open field here. This is open field over here. So if they're going to cross the road, they're most likely going to do it somewhere over here and use my client's parcel, which is good. And we want to try to leverage that within the plan, because if a deer wants to go north to south, there's a good chance that they're going to be using this parcel. But as far as water on the property, I do highlight that here just to kind of show where is the wettest part of the property. Like we could not walk through these areas on the visit, and it was a really wet time. We could walk everywhere else though. Everywhere else was dry enough to where we could walk, and it was your feet would sink in a little bit, but it wasn't to the point where we were getting wet. But in these areas here, we could not walk. But so this is kind of how we're how I'm starting most plans in most properties is by figuring out how do the deer want to move through the neighborhood. But so what I'll do now is I'm going to turn on the let's see, I'll turn it off quick and I'll turn it right back on to hit everything. And so it's very busy, very busy. This is a 40-acre parcel, so there's a lot going on here. Let me just tip it down just a little bit, and then we can kind of dive into what exactly we have going on here. So we want to try to pull these deer. We're trying to create a pattern on every property. We're trying to create a bed to feed pattern on every single property. In our client here, he had several areas that worked out good for food right away, and so we kind of can establish where this food can be, and we have a larger food source down here in the southeast corner, and he also had an area that he wanted to plant food here in kind of the center of his property. He has these giant tower blinds that he already had established. So we kind of built a few setups around these giant towers, very similar to the one that you took a picture of down in Georgia recently, like on those
Oh yeah,
big telephone poles and just a
yeah.
giant house on top of those telephone poles. So he has several of those built throughout his property. And so we kind of try to design the food plots around those so he can take his daughter and other kids in the future, when they're old enough to hunt. And so
Right, that makes
uh,
sense.
so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to create bedding opportunity in certain areas and pull those deer to food plots while also having non-invasive hunting opportunities. So as you can see here, the red dots are are bow stands. This guy's a big bow hunter. He uses a saddle as well. He hunts with his father-in-law. His father-in-law sits from, I think, ladders, fixed position stands, and then these squares are his towers that he has built. And as you can see from most of these hunting setups, especially around the house here, you nailed it. We're going to try to come out from the backyard and hunt these stands and blow our wind back to the non-deer area, back to the yard. Now, does that mean that there's never going to be deer in here? Yeah, there's going to be deer back there from time to time, but we're not going to encourage that movement. The deer aren't going to be there a lot of times during the day, especially with the dog, the livestock, the kids running around. They're going to be in these areas here that we've improved for whitetail habitat, and so he can sit along the fringe of this movement and blow scent back to the property for that west northwest wind, and really have pretty clean access, and he can hunt these stands over and over again. We also have setups kind of coming in from the road here. He only has to go maybe 100 yards from the road, and they can hunt different corners. Uh, Again, it's a little bit riskier on this side, but these are more for if you have like an east wind, you can kind of blow your scent out into the neighbor's field here as these deer are running through the woods. And yeah, I think we have a couple more east wind setups over here. We did not throw anything along this border here for the reason it's too risky. If we had setups along the side here and we're blowing our scent into this woodlot here, we would likely be educating a lot of the deer that our client is going to be hunting, and so we opted to not do that. We do have one right here this is a very high risk stand. Every time we deliver a report, we create video narratives very similar to what we're doing right now. We kind of go over the plan with the landowner and just talk through it like we're doing. And this is one that I emphasized in that video is this is a super high risk stand. That hunt it a couple times a year during that sweet time. If you got a buck pattern and he's hitting that, if you have a cell camera here and he's hitting that scrape, man, go in and get them, but don't hunt it over and over again because you could really mess your property up if you hunt this one too many times. But
Right. It looks like one of those spots where it's like, I'd really rather not put this here, but it has to be.
yeah, yeah,
Like
and I try to
you
do that
can't
on every
not put
property. Is put a
anything there.
couple in there where it's like it's this is high risk. Like
Right.
I've got those on my property. I've got stands. It's like some of I might not have hunted that stand in 3 years, but you know what? This is the year. I'm going in. I'm going to go in there and
Right.
I'm gonna get them. And so you want to have those setups, but you don't want to hunt them very often. As long as they know that, then and they don't blow it out, then it'll be okay.
Right. Right. I love this very, very long line of movement that you've got running north to south on this property. A
Yep.
lot of clients who have a let's say a little bit different shape, to a property, a long, skinny property, much like this one, right? It was probably an 80 that was cut in half at some point in the past, right?
Yep.
Um, so probably looked a little bit more rectangular until it was split right down the middle. Both siblings got road frontage, I'm sure, is how it kind of broke down whenever the property changed hands, I bet. Um, but something like this takes what could be a weakness of the property, namely it's long and skinny, and turns it into a very, very real strength. All of a sudden, you've got a buck walking along this very, very long path, north to south or south to north. Lots of bedding for him to check, lots of mock scrapes for him to hit, lots of opportunities to eat up his daytime hours, which is oftentimes what we're trying to do with a plan. Whether we harvest him that day or not, we'd love him to spend a lot of time on our property.
Yep, and you nailed it. And it works a lot with what these deer in the neighborhood want to do naturally. Uh, they want to move north to south through this parcel. Like if they want to go from the south side and they want to go across the road or to the north part of this parcel, they really there's opportunities to go other ways, but the strongest way or the most attractive way going forward is going to be this parcel. And same thing if they want to go north to south, they're going to travel through my client's parcel, right down the middle using these travel corridors. And like you said, not only does this buck have to spend a lot of time going through here, but now we have multiple stand opportunities in different spots to help us spread the pressure throughout the property. Like it's not just one spot that we have to get an opportunity at this buck. We could get him from two. We could try him from three. Okay. Maybe we want to switch things up a little bit. We have more of a north wind. Let's go here from go after him from seven. And as he's working his way through, checking these doe bedding areas, okay, northwest wind, he's coming along the downwind side of this bedding area here. We got him, you know. So
Right.
there's a lot of opportunity here, depending on the wind direction, depending on the time of year, time of day. Yeah, that this what's cool about the property plans here is we set something up for every time of the season, every time of day, every wind direction. You're going to have a stand to sit. And this
Right.
is with two people, so he's hunting with two people, and every time you add a hunter it does get more challenging, but like with two people you can comfortably hunt this parcel for most wind directions for multiple times in the day.
Right. Yeah, you have quite a few stand locations on this parcel. How many did you end up with?
So I think I labeled them. 18 is the back porch, but I like to have a lot of different stand setups, and this is kind of, some people might think it's crazy, and you don't have to put all the stands in if you don't want to. But like these stands here, like 8 and 7, those are 60 yards apart, so that's fairly close. But like 8 and 6, or 8 and 5, like those are, I don't know, 120 yards apart. It looks like about the same distance, but like they're different movements. They really are. So like if you have a buck that's coming in, and let's say he's coming off the neighbors, he's running up this little hedgerow here, and he gets to this swamp, and he hits this trail, and he comes in, you're safe here with a northwest. He's going to hit this water hole, but if he takes a left and goes up, 7 doesn't get him, right?
Right.
So there's different stand locations, and each one of them has a purpose. And like maybe this, like 7 would, I would hunt that one more in the afternoon, as these bucks are maybe going to hit this small food plot before coming out to this larger food plot out here. And
Right.
8 might be more my morning stand, where I'm more in the cover, a little bit more secure. I got my water hole, my mock scrape, and they're both very similar wind stands, but maybe different time of day stands. And a lot of times too, like a buck might, he could loop around. Like in the morning, he'll loop around checking does, so he could loop around and hit that food plot too. So you might get him from both, but it also helps you spread the pressure around a little bit. Even just like your small scent cone around these stands, they will shift their patterns a little bit, and they might avoid one area if you overhunt it. Depending on your scent control, and if you are paying attention to the wind. And so that's where I like having multiple stand setups, even though they're only 60 yards apart. And these are
Right.
like
No,
really close together, but one's a tower and one's a more of a bow setup. He loves to bow hunt, so would be one to take the kids out to, keep them warm, and this one maybe to have a, more of a bow shot.
right. Right. Yeah, I always err on the side of too many stands. Not too many, but a lot more than I would just, I don't know, man. I never want to come across that situation where it's like, boy, I really wish I'd have had a stand 80 yards that way. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Especially if it's on a 40-acre parcel. Like, you know, 18 stands sounds like a lot. In the big scheme of things, it's not that many. Once they're set up and there, I mean, a bulk of the work is done. So,
Right. Yep. And this guy, I think he hunts out of a saddle every once in a while. So really, all he has to do is prep the tree. So that
oh,
makes
very
it
nice.
that much easier. Now, if his father-in-law wants to hunt, then I think he hunts out of a fixed position ladder. But yeah, like having 17 stands, really 17 stands. It seems like you said, it seems like a lot right away, but you don't have to put them all in right away. And that's what I talk about within our report and these videos. These are the stands that are priorities. These are the ones that have to go on right away. And you might say these are like 8 stands. 8 stands have to go on right away, and then put maybe 6 in the next year, or 4, and then 4 the next year. And over time, work on adding more. Same thing with improvements. We put together for every client a priority list of different improvements that they need to get done this season to have the biggest impact on the property. And so like, how many bedding areas does this place have? One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7, 8. 8 different timber bedding cuts, along with some conifer cuts. So I mean, there's over 10 to 12 different bedding cuts on this property alone. There's no way anyone's going to get that done in a single season, even a couple seasons. So I mean,
Right. That's a lot
you
of
have
work.
to. It's a lot of work, and so you have to kind of spread this out over time, and just know that each year, just chip away at it. Just keep continuing to grind it at the property improvements. Keep making the property better, and just follow that list of recommendations on the priority list on which ones to uh, tackle first.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your the travel that you have established through here.
Sure.
Was there a strong line of movement that you were taking and strengthening further, or was it more scattered through here and you're trying to begin to bottleneck that down now? Because when I look at this property, I'm thinking, this looks like one they could have been walking anywhere in this 150-yard wide strip.
Yep. So it's a combination of both. So deer are like,
Oh,
especially like in like this area here with this, with the neighbor's property. There's probably going to, there's trails that kind of come in and out, but there was a decent trail that we saw uh, kind of coming down this way a little bit. Now it didn't follow exactly how we have it in here, but it was a good travel or good travel corridor north to south. And as you can see, it's a little bit wetter. You can see that darker color. That's the water, or just wet, and that's why I picked this image, because you can, the leaves are off the trees. But there was a stronger movement through there because it was thicker. And so what we're doing is we're taking basically like a forestry mulcher, and we're grinding this up, and we're creating a really clear path through that, just to encourage those deer right down here. And it's a perfect distance from the property line to where, you know, if this is more open hardwoods over here too. So as we thicken this up, they're gonna select this travel corridor over this. Now they're still gonna be over here, but they're gonna select this one over that because this is more open, this is thick, and this is gonna be a nice easy place to travel within cover. And it's really close to these bedding cuts, which create basically a hard edge, because these orange areas, which are timber cuts, that's almost like a 80% to 100% cut. And so that's going to create a hard edge right on the outside of it. And so that a lot of times you're going to have, like, after you cut these bedding pockets, a lot of times you're going to have a deer trail that pops up right on the side of it, just because it's a
Right.
hard edge. And so that's what you can use that with, like with these white blockades. You can create a pinch point with that. You can do the same thing with bedding cuts. And so
Right.
you can that's why, so these right here, I don't think that there was a travel corridor here, but because we have these bedding cuts where they are, we know that there's going to be one in the future, especially if we create it. If we have a bedding cut here, a bedding cut here, and then we go and blaze a trail that connects to this food plot trail from this scrape, and we have a kind of a scrape on the other side of it. So we are going to basically be conditioning these deer to take this path. Like if they want to get from here to here, the easiest way to do that is through the trail that we made for them.
Right. Right. So you touched on a topic that I was literally discussing with a client 3 days ago. Okay. Um, very, very large property, pretty pretty wild property.
Mm,
Um, the spots that are thick are extremely thick now, with woody undesirable species, right? So
okay.
we got a lot of resetting to do on in some locations, but we've got a lot of travel corridors that we want to cut in as well. And a lot of times we'll cut those in by hand, and there'll be smaller trails that we're putting in for deer. And he said he brought up the topic of a mulcher, asking, does that make too wide of a trail? I've got a mulcher that goes on the front of my skid steer. What's that going to look like? So you guys are going to use a forestry mulcher for this. What's that process going to look like to get that set up, and then maybe maintaining it moving forward?
So I think it's either he has a lot of equipment himself. So I don't know if it's exactly like a forestry mulcher, or if it's just a brush hog that he's going to throw on the back of his ATV or the tractor. It's somewhere along in that range. But basically, we are going to blaze a trail through here. So it's going to probably be wider than like your walk behind uh, brush hog, but it's going to
Right.
be a little smaller than probably the forestry mulcher. So it's going to be somewhere in between there. And the first step is just to go and cut any large tree that's in the way out of there. So any rocks that are in the way, try to get those out of there. Any large tree goes out, just so you can drive through. And then the first step is just to drive through and clear trail. And then you're going to probably have, depending on the area, you're also going to need to drop a few trees next to the trail. And you're going to drop those
Mhm.
perpendicular to the line of movement that you're trying to encourage. And what that's going to do is it's going to do a few things. One, it's going to discourage deer from exiting your trail, because if they're trying to walk down this path you've made and they try to get off it, well, now they just ran into a tree because it's lying perpendicular to your trail. And then, now you don't do it to every single tree. You might drop a couple one way, go 5 to 10 yards, drop a couple the other way, 5 to 10 yards, drop some more the other way. And so it's not every tree, because you don't want to make this thing too tight, excuse me, where they're not able to get off the trail. But you do want to make sure that they're able to stay, or that they're encouraged to stay on the trail by discouraging them from leaving. And then the second thing that does is it allows sunlight to get onto the trail, because you want
Right.
this area to be thick. And this area here is already pretty thick. It's one of those it's a lower area. You know, a lot of those upland trees aren't growing there, so it's just a kind of a swampier area. More of the shrubs, the swamp shrubs are in there, and so it's a thicker area. But there still are some soft maples in there that we want to cut down, perpendicular to the trail to let more sunlight in and also encourage deer to stay on our path. So I would say that would be the process, and then maintaining it going forward. These travel corridors, it's okay to let them get thick as long as these deer can get up and down that travel corridor. It's okay to have some brush, encroaching on your trail, because these deer, they love to go up and down the trail and smell each one of those branches. And if you're not on them, man, that's re-encouraging. That's reinforcing that that's safe. Every time that they go there and they don't smell you, that's telling them it's safe. Now that's kind of like access, like up here on, like towards the stand 11, and up here like stand 12, we're gonna have a trail cut along the property line along this barricade. Now, when you cut a trail like that, deer do take it from time to time. You just made this beautiful trail through the woods. It's nice and easy. Deer will take your access. However, the difference between the access trail and the travel corridor is human scent. And so there's never going to be human scent in here. That's going to make a huge difference with how comfortable they are using these things during daylight. But there will be human scent every once in a while here, depending on your scent control. And they're hopefully not going to use it very often, but they will use it. And so we just want to make sure that we're never walking in here touching all that brush that's encroaching on the trail, because then that would uh, discourage the deer use. But yeah, as far as maintaining it, just make sure that you're walking these trails before the season starts, clearing any logs that are or trees that have fallen into them. And if there's ever any brush that's overlapping the trail, like extending all the way to one side or the other, I do cut that back. But I do think it's okay to have brush coming into it a little bit. Now, if you have a
Right.
food plot trail, which we have here, then I am a little bit more picky with what's coming into my trail, because I want maximum sunlight. And I want to have those, I want to let those deer go up and down that trail freely. Not that they can't move up and down the travel corridor freely, but I want them to be able to have maximum food plot tonnage in this little space as much as possible. So I do treat these a little bit different. I do cut the brush back to the side a little bit on these food plot trails.
Right, and sunlight can often be a limiting factor when we're trying to do some of those trail plots. Like it it can be a downright challenge if you've not positioned them correctly and if you've not daylighted the plot appropriately
Right.
on either side.
Yep.
Um, so one of the things that I was talking about with this other client was he was concerned, number one, with the amount of work that will have to go into clearing some of these travel routes, and then the size, the width of using this forestry mulcher that he has. He's like, man, I don't know, like that makes me, I'm not so sure. And I was like, man, go in there, do it with the mulcher this year so that you get the work completed, and then just stay out. Like the deer will start to pick it up. We're
Right.
going to be thickening the area up. We're going to be, on either side of it, we're going to be laying some trees down, letting sunlight get in there. This area is extremely thick already. So we're giving them the best option of travel to use, the most, uh, the path of least resistance by a long shot, and then they'll take care of the rest of that. It'll start to grow in from the sides. It will narrow up a bit. If for some reason you're not getting the use out of it that you want and you're like, it's a little too cluttered, then you can go in and clear it by hand. But don't be afraid to go in there and mow that stuff down to get the work done, because they're going to start using it. Like they will take it over.
Right. I would say the same thing. Yeah. The first time, just clear it, get the work done, open it up, and over time, it's going to thicken up, and you will have to do maintenance year by year, whether it's clearing a tree or if it gets too thick in there, then yeah, you're probably going to have to go in there and recut it. Now, maybe don't recut it with the forestry mulcher. Maybe try to find something a little smaller for the maintenance. Maybe a walk behind brush hog, or maybe uh, a mower that you can pull behind your ATV. That seems to be like a pretty good width for what we're trying to do here. But yeah, initially go in there with the forestry mulcher and clear it out. And then what you're going to have too is you're going to have a lot of those trees that are growing on the side. They're going to extend their branches into that. Think about all the scrapes you're going to have up and down there, for a
Oh
little
yeah.
while. Like that's going to
Yep.
be a pretty good scraping corridor.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's maybe talk about the food plots just a little bit on this
Sure.
piece. I
Yep.
really like what you've got going on. I think this is unique. I think another thing that may be a question in guys' minds, maybe we'll cover it on this episode, maybe we'll cover it in another one. I notice your food plots are on one side. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that we look for with food plots. One is, how many acres do we need to set aside for food, and it's going to vary from property to property. And like I said in my initial scout of the property, I really like to figure out, what are we looking at for food plots here? What's a pretty good spot for food? Because that's going to set the foundation of where these deer want to go in the afternoon. That's going to pull these deer from point A to point B, and so food is extremely important. And in this area here, because it's in a mixed ag setting, and we're really only dealing with 32 acres of deer area on this property, we didn't need too much food. But I think total, we have, if I did my math right, we've got about a little over 2 acres, 2.5 acres of total food, and it might be like an acre of fall green food, like your brassicas, your grains, your clovers, things like that. And then we have, my client loves corn, and so we incorporated some corn there as well. I think we have just over an acre's worth of corn as well. So still food, but the nice thing about corn is we can use it as cover, and we can use it to steer deer as well, to push them closer to stand locations, as you can see down here. But yeah, so when we also, like I said, we're using food to pull deer from point A to point B. And what we're doing here is we have the cover here to the west, and we had an open area here to the east, and so that was really made the most sense on to put the food plot down in the southeast corner. And so then that kind of created a movement. We were going to pull deer kind of from this west area here to the east, or even like from these bedding pockets here, uh, up to this smaller food source here. Now, I don't think that this smaller one's going to hold deer, but they're most likely going to travel from food plot to food plot, to these larger food plots in the evening. And these are not that large, so they are probably going to stage in these plots and then make their way down to the neighbors' fields in the evening. That's what I assume is going to happen here. Now, there's other guys that might say, you put your food plots on this side, so they're kind of on the way to the neighbors the neighbor's field, but that would be a lot more work, just because these are not open. You'd have to cut all the trees down. It's a lot wet. There's too much moisture over here. I don't think you can really put a food plot there. So it has to be a spot that makes sense for a food plot as far as planting goes too. And where we have the food plots right now, in this southeast corner, as well as we have a small pass through plot up here in the north, which is not going to hold deer whatsoever. This is more just to get them to stop, a quick bite to eat, a very easy stand location to hunt after work as these deer are coming across the road. Uh, that's not going to hold deer. So we're really pulling the deer down here to the southeast corner. And what's nice about this is this neighbor down here, uh, they don't really push too far down into that part of the property. So if we are pulling deer closer to the neighbor down here, that they're likely safe. They're not going to get shot by the neighbor. I think there was some hunting pressure up in this area here. So we're a lot of times, if you can, you want to try to pull the deer away from neighbors, away from hunting pressure, like you said earlier in the video, to try to just keep these deer alive as much as possible. And that's a big thing here in Michigan, because if they leave the property, there's a good chance they're going to get shot.
Right, right. And it's funny you mentioned that. I have a client that we were talking through. He's kind of in year 2 of implementation, right? He's shot his buck for the year. He's excited to get started on habitat work. And he's like, I was wondering, like, I was at my property the other day, um, and I heard a gunshot from this direction. I'm pretty sure it was the neighbor to the north, right here near this food plot that we put in. And I'm kind of wondering, like, why do we put a food plot in that close to the property line? Like, I'm worried that that's pulling deer to the property line. And I was like, we are as much pulling deer away from the property line right there and off of his property because the neighbor's got to stand, 70 yards across the property line right there. It's like we are we're trying to bend the movement because the deer were already moving up and down this property line right there. I was like, we're trying
Right.
to bend the movement down the hill to the food plot and then let them go back up this other ridge rather than back onto him. So we're trying to keep those deer safe with that food plot right there.
Yeah, even maybe even slow them down. So even if they want to get to the bait pile or whatever that neighbor's got on the other side of the fence, like slow them down. Like put something on your side of the fence to give them a reason to stop, just for 2 minutes, because that 2 minutes could save that deer's life. And that's where,
Yeah.
like you said earlier, all these different improvements, whether it's bedding areas, mock scrapes, water holes, you know, all of that is going to take time. It's going to take time for that buck to get through here, and that could be the difference between getting that 2 year old to 3 years old, or 3 years old to 4 years old. And if it was just wide open hardwoods, like the neighbor's property here, that deer is just going to walk through. He's going to cut the corner here. That would be a good stand location there. You'll just make it lucky from time to time that deer's going to walk up and he'll be through that property in 5 minutes. But like this property
Right.
here, it's going to take him a long time to get from one side to the other with all the stuff that he has to check. And he can't see very far once it's implemented. Once all this stuff is implemented, he's not going to be able to see very far. He's going to have to check everything, and it's unpressured. Like if you look at the area of the property that's left unpressured, that's almost the entire minus the dwelling. That's a huge section of the deer area. Like it does kind of pinch down a little bit here, but as we start pushing down into the meat and potatoes, the heart of the property here, that's unpressured property. And these deer, he's already seeing the results right away, and that's kind of a fun story. Like this landowner, opening day of the archery season, shot a really nice, it looks to be a 4.5-year-old buck, out of a stand location here. And that was a fun phone call to get, because he's very engaged. He loves doing this stuff. He's always asking questions. So we were kind of talking about different strategies for the opener, and he went out there. I think it was the evening of the October 1st, and he drilled him. He got one the very first day.
So where did he kill from?
What would be your guess if you had to guess a stand that would be a good early season stand? So what we talked about early season was we didn't have him patterned. We knew there was a nice buck on the property. We didn't have him patterned, but he was hitting. He was coming into these food plots. At I think he had a camera here at night, a cell camera. He had a camera here, but it wasn't a cell camera, and so he didn't know if it was, like, if there was a deer there or not. But I think he had a camera out here, was a cell camera. They were hitting this field at night after shooting light, but he knew there was a nice buck in the area. And so my advice to him was to sit an observational stand. And I guess I can tell you like which stands are the observational stands, and that might give it away. But I mean, that was my advice, to sit an observational stand, see if we can see what this see into the movement a little bit, to see if we can pattern this deer. Where is he coming from? Is there anything we can do to get on this deer in the next couple days or next couple weeks? Any information we can get on this deer. But let's start slow. Let's start with an observational sit. And so his tower blinds, uh, yeah, 6, 3. Like obviously these are all kind of edge stands. But yeah, I told him
Right.
to do more of an observational sit. Don't push too far into the property yet. Don't be walking to the back. Just sit more close to the house if you can, and see if
Yeah.
you can not push in too far.
My guess would have been two.
Okay, you're
Uh,
very close.
am I?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're very
That
close. So
is that an observational set at
so
two? Because it looks like you could probably see a good bit.
yeah, so I mean that's a decent stand, because he can blow his scent right back to the. It kind of depends on the wind direction, and he
Right.
can blow his stand
Right.
right back to the house. Same with one, he can blow it right back to the house. He ended up shooting him from three.
Ah, from three. Okay.
From
So
three.
yeah. Yeah. That's
Yep.
awesome.
So, and what
That
was
is
funny
awesome.
about that is he had a camera right there, and he checked the camera, and that deer was there every day, but it wasn't a cell camera. So it was going to be a no. If he had a cell camera there, it was a no-brainer conversation. Like he would have had to like call or anything like that. Like, but it was yeah.
I love it.
That was, it was a fun story. The dude can shoot, man. He, I can't remember what he said, but he took a shot that's a lot further than what that I would have taken. But I think he shoots at like 60 yards and hits like a tennis ball at 60 every time. It's like holy smokes, man. So he drilled that deer from number three. And he what the cool thing was is we knew going in that a lot of deer are in this area here because this guy or this lady, whoever it is, doesn't hunt a whole lot, and so he was trying to find a way to. He wants deer to bed on his property. That was one of the biggest challenges. One, he wants to shoot nice deer, but he wants them to be on his property and have opportunities at these deer. Okay, so we need to. If you want deer to bed on your property, we need bedding on your property, and we also need to make sure it's unpressured. So we had before we got there, we had stands here in the middle, and so we got rid of those stands altogether. We moved them more to the exterior, then put bedding in those areas. And so that deer, I hope I'm getting the story right, but I think he came from this area here. He like walked down this trail that he made
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
and then came right out and got shot.
Yeah. The diversity in that little, is that a like a valley there or something, or a ridge top, or what
So
is that?
I the when you tip it down here, it does look like there's hills. It's really flat. So
It's really flat. Okay.
there's a little bit of roll. There's a little bit of roll here, but not much. Uh, you know, there's it's for the most part flat. This was
Right.
an opening that we wanted to do something with, and what we didn't really necessarily know what, and what we landed on was a pollinator mix with some diversity in the center. So very similar to like if you had a switchgrass field with a diversity pocket, and this is going to be more of a pollinator mix with a kind of shrub plantings in the center, just because that it's going to encourage deer to. It's a good summer bedding area with that pollinator mix, good woody browse there, create some edge. But we don't necessarily want to put food there because then that might hold deer up there when we could pull them out here to these food plots here and have hunting opportunities. Now you could put a food plot there and just never hunt it and just have that be a spot just for the deer. But we decided that if we're going to put a food plot in, we want to have hunting opportunities, and so we just decided on that one to have a pollinator mix. But this deer was back here
Right.
somewhere along this edge, and he came right down. That this trail did not exist, so I think that like, he put this one in, and he the deer followed that trail, went right out to the food plot, started eating, and he shot him.
I love it.
Yep. So
I
that
love it. That's
it's
amazing.
always fun, like when you yeah, get that phone call of someone that you worked with, and they shoot this was a really nice buck. I'll see if it lets me put a picture of it up on the screen, but it was a really nice deer, and yeah, it's a fun phone call to get when the plan comes together. And the cool thing is I would say we're just scratching the surface of the potential because this guy's young, he's
Mm.
ambitious, he does a lot of the work. You know, I think he's cut a lot back there, so he's done a lot of it. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think he's only scratching the surface of what's possible on this parcel.
Right. Right. All right. Anything else as you look at this piece that you're like, hey, we need to dive into this, specific stand location or this specific feature?
So there's a couple of man, you could spend hours on just one plan, and that's what we do with those video narratives is we really spend a lot of time explaining everything. So I'm going to touch on
Right.
two things before we I guess kick it off here is and one is going to be these barricades here. So a lot of times when you have deer that want to travel north to south or anywhere east to west, and they got this is a natural funnel because we have open ground here, the pasture here, and there's a fence in the pasture, so they don't really want to go in there. These deer, a lot of times, they're going to go through there anyways, but they're going to want to cut through the middle. They want to be as
Right.
far away from both sides as possible. A lot of times they're gonna cut that corner and they're gonna get to that middle. So one thing that we're doing to push these deer to the outsides is we're creating a barricade. We're pushing these deer out to these different stand locations, and then we're kind of creating these social areas along the outside to kind of reward these deer and condition them to take the outside path. So this is going to be an impassable wall that they can't get around. And this is going to be a nice, easy, thick trail for them to get through. And same thing with this bedding cut here. That's going to act as a little bit of a barricade too. But this is wet here, as you can see. This is drier, so we selected this area for the bedding area. And they're going to be able to get in and out of here, but they're still going to scoot the edges of it because it'll be easier to get around. So that's one thing I wanted to kind of highlight is just that blockade, similar to how Greg kind of did that in his last plan we shared. And then the other thing is just the screening. So uh, with this house right here, deer do not want to be by people, and you have to separate yourself from the deer as much as possible. So this guy had bought hundreds of pines and spruce trees that he wanted to know where to plant. And so what we're doing is we are just lining the outside edge of his fence, his cattle pasture fence, with these pines and spruces just to add additional screening. So there is a clear separation between where the human pressure is and where the deer activity is. And so he really, the deer aren't going to see them, and that's going to make them feel that much more comfortable. I would compare it
Right.
to like if you have a cornfield and it's still up, there's a lot more deer movement in that woods right on the inside of that cornfield compared to when that corn gets cut. Right, when that corn
Correct.
gets cut, like that pushes those deer further into the timber because they don't feel as safe anymore. They don't really have that cover barrier. And uh, another thing that's very important too is this screen along the east edge. If he didn't have a screen here along the east edge, there's no way he can consistently get to and from these stand locations in the back part of his property without bumping deer. And so that's a huge improvement that needs to be done right away, or every single year if he doesn't put something permanent in. So that's something that is a top priority, is just screening from his house to get through here all the way to the back.
Right, right. And that's, man, that's something for a whole episode devoted to it, is screening and what you can use, and what you should use there in Michigan versus what I would use here in the deep south. And that's a whole big conversation. But man, the value of screening, I, I think it cannot be overblown. And I think it's one of those things that oftentimes you see it get left in the dust, because it's like, I'm going to do all the important stuff, right? Like, I'm going to put in my food plot and I'm going to do the other important things, and then I'm going to leave the screening out. And it's like, no, the screen is what makes it work.
Yep.
You know, it's what makes you be able to hunt in November instead of blowing out all your deer in October.
Right. And what looks like it's thick in the summer is not the case in November. So now in the off season is when you should be evaluating your areas that need to be screened. Because right now, this is what it looks like when you're hunting these deer during the rut, at least up here in Michigan. So like the leaves are off November 1st most years. And so like if you're walking through your woods right now, or you're walking by your food plots and you can see into the areas that the deer are, it, that area needs to be screened off, whether that's you're planting something, you're cutting trees down, whatever it is, it needs to be screened off.
Right.
Man, okay, I'm going to talk about one more thing and then I'll be done.
Yeah, go for it.
So with these food plots here too, like there was a couple ways we could have done it. Like some guys would plant this entire field in food plot. That's how you see like if you just drive down the highway, you'll see a wide open field and a box blind on the side. Like that's how a lot of guys hunt here
Right.
in Michigan. But
Tree
if
to
you want to,
tree, tree
yep,
to tree plant.
yep, exactly. If you want to have daylight deer movement, you need to compartmentalize your food plots and cut down sight lines. Not only are you going to be able to get more deer in your food plot because it's going to separate the deer and reduce social pressure, social stress, but you're going to make those bucks work during the rut. So if a buck comes out here to look for does in this food plot, well, he can't see this food plot over here. He's got standing corn in the way. So he's going to have to either go through the corn, or he's going to take this food plot trail and walk to this other food plot over here, which is why we put the food plot trail where it is. Because if he wants to take that food plot trail, then it's going to bring him right by this. This is on the property line. You couldn't get any more on the property line than this stand right here. We got a scrape tree right here, right in the middle of the food plot, and in a water hole. Now, normally I don't put a water hole right in the middle of food plots. Normally I like them kind of back on the cover like this. But in this instance here, I was like, you know what? Let's throw a water hole here just to try to encourage these bucks and these deer to get out and use this path right here. And this would be something that's fairly easy for guys to do. All you'd have to do is you plant the corn first, and then you mow it down with your brush mower. Maybe disc it up a little bit, and then plant your fall plot, plant your fall trail, and your corn is standing. And then you have a perfect winding food plot trail, full sunlight. It's cover on both sides. Like these deer are going to feel so comfortable moving from this plot to this plot. So this is another really cool really low impact stand location, is the deer aren't going to stay here either. They're going to keep moving, so you're not going to get stuck in there. You can just get out when they move by. So that's another cool uh, stand location that I really like to try to incorporate into plans when possible.
Right, right. And that's going to differ, I'm sure, when it comes to a food plot designed for a gun hunter as opposed to a bow hunter.
Oh,
Those
right.
food plots are going to look a little bit different. The screening is going to look different. We're going to try to close off sight lines for the deer, but keep them somewhat open for us, kind of thing.
Yep.
I'm curious to hear a couple of ways that you are accomplishing that. There where you are, maybe some options that guys have for sectioning off and compartmentalizing, shrinking down essentially their food plots and creating more edge, more structure in the plot. What are some of the other things besides corn that you're using for that?
So this client, he loved his corn. I think he even had it purchased before we even got to the property. So he had all his corn
Nice.
bought for the following season uh, to be planted before I was even there. So we knew we were going to put it in. But another thing, like if this is a wide open field and they didn't know what they were going to do with it, one thing that I would do differently maybe is switchgrass. Right. So it's not necessarily a food component there with switchgrass, but you could plant switchgrass along the edges here. So this here along the north side is switchgrass. So that because like this would be too complicated to recreate every season. We just decided let's shape this out. Let's align it with switchgrass, and then we'll just do our cornfield down here. We can just plant it in a square and then carve out our food plot trail from plot to plot. But on the outside, let's do switchgrass for our screening and hide our hunter access. But let's say this guy didn't want to plant corn, then we could do switchgrass on the interior as well. And then what we could do is on the interior within the switchgrass, start putting diversity pockets to start maybe encouraging bedding that much closer to these food plots. And within the switchgrass, I'd like to do a couple different things. I wouldn't just plant the whole thing switchgrass. So if this yellow was just, it wouldn't just be yellow switchgrass. It would be switchgrass with like circles similar to this on the interior with maybe pink pockets or brown pockets like this on in the middle for like whether it's shrubs or pollinator blends, just to add diversity and add food in there. Um, yeah, that's just something that I would do maybe a little bit differently if he didn't want to plant corn. So there's different ways about it, but the nice thing about that corn right there is it's a food source and it's cover. So like you don't have to like carve out bedding areas in the middle of the corn because they're going to be in here and here, but they're also going to bed in the corn too. So
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For us down here in the South, strip disking is big, especially because a lot of the properties that I step onto, uh, folks are very, very serious about their turkeys. Many of them more serious about their turkeys than they are about their deer.
okay.
And so we've actually got, we've got nesting and brooding habitat for deer, for turkey and quail are extremely, extremely important for us here. And so, for a lot of what we do for breaking up plots, we're looking at, January into February. We're going to go in and disc those areas. So we
Mhm.
get a response from the native seed bank. And we're going to have, it's not necessarily going to be the quality of screening that you might get from a switchgrass planting, but it's going to be, it's going to make the deer feel more secure. You're not going
Mhm.
to get the screening value out of it, but the deer are going to feel more secure within the food plot. The turkeys and your quail are going to benefit from that. So, just one more option for guys who are maybe in the deep south, which obviously switchgrass works down here as well. And then diversity pockets, fill them up with pokeweed and all kinds of little berry bushes, American beauty berry, and all kinds of good stuff. So,
Mhm.
Jake, man, this is a beautiful plan. I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing how this landowner progresses over the next couple of years with this property, and hopefully, lots more buck pictures to come.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited for this family, and that's why we do it, just to yeah, be on the receiving end of that phone call and see the picture of our client behind a really nice buck. Like for us here, like a nice Michigan buck. It's a really cool experience.
That's awesome. Great. Well, man, thank you so much, folks. If you listen to this and you have not yet switched over to YouTube to go watch the video, you really need to go watch it, check it out, see this beautiful property that Jake has designed, and we'll catch you next time.